Good evening. It's now 7 o'clock and I'd like to start the meeting of the Standards and Audit Committee. I'm the Vice Chair and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting in the absence of the Chair, Councillor Massey. I'd like to remind everyone present that we're going to live stream this. It's being recorded and it will be uploaded onto the Council's website. Item 1. Luke, have you received any apologies?
Yes, Chair. I've received 2 apologies from Councillor Massey and Councillor Rigby.
Thank you. Item 2. I move that the minutes of the Standards and Audit Committee meetings held on the 6th of September 2023 and the 30th of October 2023 be approved as a correct record. Does any member wish to comment? Yes, Councillor.
Is this thing on? Yes, it works. Okay, I did query in the 6th of September meeting that where the whistleblowing policy was on the work programme, and see, we've going to have an extraordinary meeting on a date to be arranged. Have we got a date on that first of all, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Collins. No, we don't at the moment, as we are trying to locate a reasonable a date that's convenient to all members. There's been quite a few clashes with other committees, so no date has been arranged as yet, but hopefully we'll be able to do that in the first quarter of next year.
Hopefully before the election, and we go into Purda. There's also, on page 13, work programme, it says Councillor Collins requested that the following reports be assigned to a meeting: the whistleblowing reports, then contract management / lessons learned, and briefing note on changes to the procurement law 2024. Have we any idea when we're going to have that update on the procurement? Is that the one going to be on the 29th of February? Anyone?
Sorry, thank you, Councillor. I can see they're not being added. That must have been an administrative error, so what I will ensure that they are included, and we will recirculate the work programme offline to make sure they're included, and we'll put them in one of the dates that we have for this municipal year. But as you say, that would likely be looking at the dates.
Preferably.
February. Yeah.
February, okay, thank you.
So we'll add that.
Okay, there was another one here about the way the minutes were noted or put together. Excuse me while I find the page. Yeah, this is on page 17 where the following points were raised. It says... member questioned how risk was quantified and assessed and what systems were being used for scoring such formula. Member also questioned whether there was a standard approach as used in other local authorities. And it goes on, member said this, member said that. Really do think we should have the names of the councillors who said these things. Also, there was no reply recorded, and we really want to have the replies recorded on the minutes. And I would also ask if we are going to add a little more detail and substance of what we were told on how risk is being calculated and assessed. I think we really do need to do that. I used to be a financial advisor, and we used to have risk charts, and we used to ask, we used to have to justify whatever decision we made for any investment we recommended for people. So I would think that we should have some sort of system in place, and I'd like to see it. And so at the next meeting, could we have something in place and somebody explain to us how they calculate and formulate a risk profile, please? Thank
you. When can we expect to get the date for the meeting? I know you say you can't decide when it will be yet, But have you got a sort of time frame that could give us some idea?
So I can't at the moment, Chair, because I don't have the calendar of meetings before me, that all the other meetings that are due to take place. So I am unable to give you an indicative date as to when that additional meeting will take place. But I will ensure there's a couple of things that are done offline. That is ensuring that the work programme is updated to include those bits, and also a date is looked at. We have Democratic Services officer here, so we can ensure that that is done. Just on the council minutes, I would, if you don't mind, Chair, I'd like to respond to that. An email was sent to all 38 councillors on the 2nd of November because there were queries raised about how minutes were undertaken in the authority. And the best value inspection, I did identify the need for the council to refresh its approach to minute taking. And that email set out what the position was, and that a report had been taken to the Governance Recovery Board, and that both leaders and group leaders and whips were contacted back in July to confirm that they were happy with the council's new approach, and that approach was agreed. So that has gone through a process, and the way the minutes are drafted are in accordance with what was agreed with the group leaders and whips.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I just ask, are we happy with the way the... And could I just have a show of hands who are unhappy with the way the minutes are recorded, please? Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
Perhaps we can have it limited,
yeah,
people were unhappy.
Yeah, so we're not happy, is that correct? The committee is not happy, is that correct?
I think that it needs to be outside of this meeting, a conversation. I don't think it's a meeting, a reason to vote.
Okay.
But I do think it's something that you need to pick up with the leaders. If the leaders have agreed it, then that's for outside of this meeting and not with the officers in the meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No, I've had concerns about the minutes, but I don't think it's for the meeting. Thank you.
Has anyone else got any questions or comments on the minutes? So can we accept that everyone agrees and we can move on to the next item? Item 3, urgent items of business. I've not agreed any items of urgent business. Item 4, declaration of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? No, thank you. Item 5, external audit progress verbal update. Can I ask Rachel Britton to present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's not actually a verbal update that I will be giving you tonight. You should have seen in papers there is a paper there entitled the Audit Planning Report for the year ending 31st of March 2021. And what I was proposing to do was just take you through that report tonight. I think in the last 2 meetings we've spoken a lot about the need for us to reassess risk and to consider our risk assessment processes. And essentially this report is the output of that reassessment of risk. To reassure committee, we have been doing a lot of work over the last sort of 6 weeks since we last met. A lot of it is behind the scenes, so it's not things that you necessarily will see an output from, but this document is kind of the culmination of all of that work. As it is a planning report, it takes you through the risk that we've identified and our proposed procedures for addressing that risk. Obviously, given where we are, there is progress in a number of areas. It doesn't include that because it is a planning report and it's just kind of the template of the report that includes that. But what I will do is verbally take you through kind of where we are for each of those sections. Sorry, you have to bear with me. I've had a cold all week. And then what we'll do is bring a more updated report position with progress and hopefully by that point some starting to bring some conclusions to the next committee in February. So I'll take you through the key areas on the report. As I said, this is an update of this report, so there will have been one that came to the March 21 committee. Obviously, I appreciate a lot has happened since then, so I will just take you through sort of high level. I'll start on page 4, which is materiality. Again, we've spoken a bit about materiality in the last meeting. Just to confirm that the materiality level that we proposed has not changed. So I've been through a process of considering whether there is anything that impacts on my initial assessment of materiality, and have been through a consultation process and have confirmed that that is unchanged. So we are proposing to set materiality at the same level, which is 1.75% of gross expenditure. And that for the council comes out at a materiality level of 8.2 million. We will, however, report to you all unadjusted errors over £328,000. So you will see any errors over that amount that aren't adjusted. And we will also include in our final report a schedule of adjusted errors as well for your information. On page 5, it just confirms that we are independent of the council, and that's something that we are required to confirm. This page also sets out our audit fees. The audit fee included there is the audit fee per the standard audit fee that's set by PSAA. Obviously, as I've also said as well, there's a lot of additional work and a lot of additional risk management processes that have gone into this engagement, so there will be a significant additional fee that will be proposed towards the end of the engagement. That fee will be discussed with management, and then it will go through the independent process with public sector audit appointments. So that fee is kind of independently ratified to make sure that it's appropriate for the level of work that we've done. So the next page that I was going to take you to is page 8, which is an overview of the risks. So a number of these risks will have, you'll have seen before in our previous report. So the first risk there, management override of controls. That is a risk that we need to have under our ISAs, and we tailor that risk appropriately. In terms of updates, so the testing for this particular risk was substantially complete. However, we do need to just make sure that we have understood our new risk attributes that we're adding in, and make sure that there is any other areas that come up are tested under this particular risk. The second risk there is revenue recognition. And there's no change to this risk. The focus remains on grant income with performance conditions attached. Again, that work is substantially complete, just needs to go through the review process. The third risk there, expenditure cut-off, is a risk that's not changed. The focus of this risk is around transactions around the year end to ensure that they are in the correct accounting period. And again, that work is substantially complete and just needs to be go through the review processes. Another risk that's not changed is the valuation of non-current assets. Again, we have done a substantial amount of work to address this risk previously, and there is one area that we now need to follow up on, and that is regarding some of the assumptions used, and we just need to consult internally with our valuation colleagues, and then that area will also be complete. Obviously, all of this is subject to the review processes I've discussed before. Valuation of pension liability. There is no change to the kind of underlying point of this risk. However, in this report, we have drawn out now both the risk from the asset valuation side and the asset and the liability valuation side, which contribute to that net pension liability position. Again, work on this is substantially complete. A lot of this work, we rely on the auditor of Essex County Pension Fund. So they do the work on our behalf and they send us an assurance letter. So again, that work has been substantially complete. Allowance for the non-collection of receivables, no change to this risk, and that is looking at how you calculate your allowance for expected credit losses on these balances. Again, that work is substantially complete. So moving on, the next risks are around investments. We did previously have a significant risk in relation to the classification of investments, but it was quite high level. So what we've done in this plan is to break it down into kind of each of the component parts of the risk. So we have the classification of investments as a significant risk, and that is to confirm whether the investment is debt or equity based, and then whether it should be classified as amortised cost or fair value through profit and loss. The Council has done a number of papers for us in relation to these investments, which we have gone through and assessed. We have had our IFRS 9 financial reporting colleague involved in this, and should be in a position by the end of the first week of December to confirm with the Council the treatment that they've proposed is acceptable, and therefore that we can move on to the other parts of the risk. The next part is the valuation of these instruments at fair value through profit and loss. So this, once that they've been assessed at this level, they then need to have a valuation done. So when we agree that those which investments will be held at fair value through profit and loss, the Council will then need to go away, engage valuers, work out a method for valuing these assets, these investments, and then they will need to come back and we will need to audit that. So that's kind of the next stage in the process. Similarly, risk number 9 is around assets carried at amortised cost, and we need to check whether valuations are reasonable and whether there's any impairment considerations which were appropriate. So again, linked into that kind of valuation assertion. And we will do that again once the Council has gone away and considered that. In terms of new risks, so we have financial instrument disclosures in there. And given there is likely to be a number of additional disclosures in relation to the investments due to the classification, there will be a number of additional disclosures that are required. So we've got that in as a risk to make sure that those disclosures are in line with requirements, and we'll look at that. We can't currently do the work on that because we need the updated financial statements to be able to do that. So again, it's kind of a step process. Once we've got through the first couple of points in terms of the valuation, then the Council will be able to draft the disclosures and give them to us for audit. And then the next part is around investment income and just making sure that that is complete and accurately recorded in the financial statements, and that test is also in progress. In terms of new risks, we have a risk around the minimum revenue provision. That risk will be focusing on looking at the Council's revised MRP policy, making sure that it's prudent and in line with guidance and the underlying calculations are correct. The position on this one is that we are just waiting for the Council to finalise their approach. Once they've done that, they will provide it to us and we can audit it. The next risk is around infrastructure assets, and again we spoke about this a little at the last meeting, but this is the risk that has arisen from the national issue. So it's not just an issue that's affecting Thurrock. Essentially, the risk is that these assets need to be accounted for in line with a new statutory instrument that came out earlier in the year. The Council has provided us with a paper outlining their proposed treatment of these, and we are in the process of auditing that and expect to have audit queries back to the Council by Friday. A new issue that's come up is around the rack concrete. Again, we've got this in as a risk just because it's something that's arisen and needs to be considered. This risk is around reviewing the council's process for identifying whether they have any potential RAC issues that need to be considered. So currently we don't think there are any, but we just need to make sure the council has done a robust process to identify those, and then we can look if there's any next steps needed. And the final risk is around intangible assets, which again we've spoken about briefly before, but there was some change in accounting standards, and we need to review the council's intangible assets, ensure they've been capitalised appropriately in line with that new requirement. Again, the council has provided us with a paper. We have undertaken an initial review of that and gone back with queries to the council, who have provided responses, and now we're just working through those. So there is progress in a number of these areas. So even though it's sort of set out as planning, I just wanted to reassure you that we have done a lot of work in a number of these areas. The next thing I just wanted to draw your attention to was on page 9, and just again, we've said this before, but there is an objection to the financial statements. And just to draw your attention that that work is with our forensics team, and they are going through all the information they need to support and come to a conclusion on that. But just really to reflect, one of the things we need to consider with all objections is around legality, and if there is any potential issues that may impact on the financial statements. So as I've said before, those things will go hand in hand, and I'll need to be content with both areas before I'm able to issue an opinion. Page 11, I was just going to draw your attention to our approach to IT. This is one area that just still remains in progress, so just to highlight that. However, we don't rely on IT general controls, and we don't rely on any test of controls. So I do not think it will impact on the testing strategy that we've set out here, but just wanted to highlight that that is one area that we just need to finalise with some additional queries that have gone out to the council and also internally with our TRA team. And then the final thing I was going to just point out was on page 30, which is around use of resources and value for money. I think, again, as we've discussed and as you will expect, the risk assessment in terms of the value for money has highlighted that there is a risk of significant weakness in your arrangements around financial sustainability and governance, and that is obviously reflecting what has come out of the BVI report. So we will need to do some work around those areas, drawing on that report and drawing on the other sources of information that we have, and we'll come to a conclusion when we issue our auditor's annual report, which will be at the same time as I issue the opinion. So I will stop there and let you ask any questions.
Well, thank you for struggling through anyway. Have any members got any comments or questions? Yeah, please, carry on.
Could you just clarify what these financial instruments are, please, on page 9 or page 3?
So that's any investments or debt that the council holds. Financial instruments is kind of the generic term for those.
Just debts and assets, yeah.
Sorry?
Sorry, assets?
Debt and, yeah, investments.
Right, okay, thank you.
So there is a definition of what constitutes a financial instrument. There are other things in there, but they are mainly what we're talking about.
Yes, please, Chair. Now, the fourth paragraph down, and it's replicated. This is on our page link, page number 28, fourth paragraph down. PDO received an objection to the draft 2021 financial statements. And we have it repeated on page 29. It's the middle paragraph. We have an objection to the financial statements relating to the Council of Borrowing Investment. Auditor responsibilities in relation to objections extend to considering the legality of the transactions. What should we be worried about? The term legality, it seems to wave a very big red flag. Or is it just an administrative error?
So the way the objection process works is when an objector raises a concern about the financial statements, one of our duties is to consider the legality of those transactions. So it is something that we do in the course of looking at any objection. So no particular red flags, but it is something that we will need to look at and come to a conclusion on.
Thank you. Yeah.
So you did say that it's with your forensic team. When do you expect us to have a response from them and formalise, you know, whether there is anything wrong with them or not? Because obviously it's like a noose around your neck if we just don't know. But you know, hats off to whoever that person was.
So the process is a long one. In terms of the objection, I deal directly with the objector, and that does not go into the public domain. That response does not go into the public domain. It's a private exchange of information. However, if there is issues that I feel the council need to raise, it will either be drawn out by a number of means. So we have additional powers that we can use. So I could issue a public interest report to highlight that issue to the public if I felt that it was necessary, or I could issue the council with statutory recommendations to change processes or to think about those transactions. And not to say set hairs racing, but there is also a process that can involve going back to the court and declaring transactions illegal, and therefore having a court process involved. But that is very unusual, doesn't happen. You know, it's you know, a very unusual power that we would use.
Do we have a time frame from when we can expect? Like, is it 3 months, 6 months? Are we with this another year?
I'm hoping to conclude it alongside the audit, which I have said currently will be around February, March time. So still working to that timetable. But obviously there's a lot of kind of moving parts to this. So, you know, that's a very much a aspirational timetable.
So just to come back on that, so the audit, so I'm new to this committee, so I'm just playing catch up a little bit. So this audit, you're expecting it to be concluded. I just feel like we're looking in the rear-view mirror a little bit here. You know, lots of this stuff, I could sit out there and tell you the answers to a lot of it, you know, because we've been there, it's in the paperwork, it's been found in the inspections, you know, and I think that this is the 2021, we've got 2022, and I understand. I'd like to put them all together, but I understand if you find anything here, it moves on to the next year. So you do think that we're beginning to get to an underline with this year at least?
Yes, we're making good progress. As I said, we're now at a point where, you know, we're content with our risk assessment, which was a big exercise given all of the things that have happened and all the information that we need to take on board. As I said, obviously if you're new you won't be aware, but the audit was substantially complete with exception of the investments balances back in August time last year. So the rest of the audit is pretty much there. So it is just drawing these things to a conclusion. But like I said, there is a lot of information that we need. There's a lot of things that the council needs to do and get to us. So yeah, I think if we can get everything, you know, keep progressing at the level that we are, then I'm hopeful that we'll get there by March.
Has anyone else got any comments? Councillor College, if you want to go.
I've been through it with a fine-tooth comb, so I just want to ask a few. Your page 15, our page 35, we're talking about risk detail. And it says, ISA UK people notes that the management is in a unique position to perpetrate fraud. The management has the ability to manipulate accounting records and override controls and otherwise appear to be operating effectively. We are required to consider this as a significant risk of material misstatement due to fraud. There is a specific risk for our revised audit approach in relation to the adjustments raised by the management in redrafting the accounts following government intervention. These are more likely to be subject to manipulation. I don't actually think this is necessarily the one for you to answer, so I'll just throw it out to the other members as well if they want to step in, is that how do we stop this from happening?
So in terms of the risk, I'll just say a bit about the risk and why I've included that as a risk. So with all of these things, when you get so far behind, like past the year-end date, there is obviously a number of transactions that are sort of set in stone. So all of the things that happened during the year have all gone through your accounting system. So there is a position that we've got to there. So this risk is more around that year-end position. The risk for us is that given the position, the financial position the council is, there could be a potential that the council wants to make 2021 financial position the worst possible case so that you can then show improvement. I'm not saying that is what they're doing, but that is a potential risk. And that could be done through any adjustments to the financial statements that happen during the course of audit and through the changes that the finance team will be putting through in terms of some of these investment balances and the valuations. So what we will do to counteract that from audit is we will audit those balances, those adjustments, make sure that they stack up with our audit work, with what we've been discussing, and that there's nothing that in this accounting period that shouldn't be.
Isn't this a particular task for our own internal audit, who should be able to have systems in place to pick this up, any jiggery-pokery? Do we have anyone from the internal audit here tonight?
Jonathan, a bit of comment.
Sorry, Councillor Collins, I'm not from internal audit, but I'll do my best. So, as Rachel said, so obviously these transactions are effectively additional transactions that will be added manually to the system post-year end, basically. So, as Rachel said, the system shut down at the end of 2021, so all the automated transactions are in at that point. And really what we're talking about here is the investment transactions, and this is really about valuations and changes in valuations. So, first of all, and the key thing to note is, we know these transactions are absolutely going to be under complete scrutiny. But for us, I mean, ultimately, so when I was reporting on these positions last year, what we did was accumulate what we knew at the time about the projected loss. What this exercise now is allocating what we now know, so that loss will have moved, first of all. And when we're happy with the position for all the investments at that point in time, we've got to allocate not just to 2021, but actually to 1920 and 1819 as well, because they're all covered by that set of accounts. So, in simple terms, what we've got is a schedule that is allocating those transactions year by year, and obviously we will share that schedule specifically for audit with Rachel and team. And there will be some navigation in that, because Rachel's team may have a slightly different view of how something should be allocated to one year or another. But through that process, we will end up with a set of balances that we're happy with, and ultimately audit need to be happy with. If we do something and they're not happy with it, you will see it reported back to you as part of their out-term report. I can't personally see any motivation to do that. I sort of understand the point Rachel made about, you may want to sort of put all your bad news in one year, but actually the bad news, is out there, as it were, and we just want to get these things correctly accounted for in the right year, as Councillor Worrell said, if nothing else, so we can move on into subsequent years. We will then have the same exercise. One of the most difficult parts is, say with the Toucan investment, is the actual valuation of just that investment at different points in time with all the information we now know. So it's quite a difficult process to allocate what was the value, say, in 1819. Now we know subsequently something happened with that investment. What period of time did that happen? When should we apply that from? And that's where the judgment and navigation is a little bit more difficult. But again, no motivation to understate, overstate. It's really just about getting it right. So.
Yeah, I quite understand what you're saying. It's just basically, we're just looking at systems. I'm just from a purely system for what you said. We've got apparently a possibility that management has the ability to manipulate accounting and records and override controls. I take it that's our internal controls. And my question was, how do we stop that from happening?
Yes, so in this case, what we're talking about is manual transactions as part of the year end that we've got to make a judgment on, then we add into the system. So therefore, theoretically, I could go in, come to a view on a transaction, post an amount for that transaction. How do we stop that? Well, we are supporting that with a process that we are then presenting to audit. So any transaction that is on that schedule will then be passed to Rachel for deliberate review. Now, that's an external audit review because ultimately external audit are responsible for the audit of our closing balances. Internal audit will tend to be focused on ongoing transactions within our systems. So their normal reviews would focus on all our core systems. But when you get to year end, the focus will be from external audit because ultimately they're signing off that set of accounts. So you can see very clearly the additional risks that have been added by Rachel that she's just run through, and they're all targeted at specifically, one, understanding what the valuation of investments are in that example, but also then how these mechanics bring it through into the accounts at the year end. So I think really, honestly, the scope for, well, there's no motivation to get anything other than the right answer, and we know audit will review those transactions and all the backing to them. So, for example, with each individual investment, there's a paper that is presented to Rachel's team which sets out the different areas of classification, valuation, etc. They will be the support for the numbers that ultimately end up in that year-end transaction. So you can take assurance from the process is underpinned by a series of detailed documents and then judgments made by both Rachel and their technical team and our technical assessment of it in the first place. We've got advice as well. So all those things are coming together to hopefully present accurate positions for the council. It is a very difficult area. And I said this last year when we were only anticipating what this would look like. And in some ways it's more complex because things are moving all the time. So on different investments. So but we're in a good place, as Rachel said. We've presented many of the papers to the team for review, and we're, as Rachel said, they're coming back with comments on those reviews imminently. So I'm very hopeful we'll get to that position as quickly as we can.
Just so I'm clear, if I may, are you in charge of the internal audit now, or? Am I trying?
Yes. Well, it will currently. Yeah. So it's reported previously straight to the Chief Finance Officer. It's now reporting into the Assistant Director, which I nominally will assimilate to theoretically. So yes, imminently, but it hasn't to date. It hasn't up to. So certainly for 2021, it wasn't reporting to me at that point. No.
Realise that one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Chair.
Just one question from me then. Reading through, there's lots of places where you're checking accuracy and so on. Are you finding it easy to get all the information you need from the council?
Yes, to date we have had back, so we use a system called Inflow to track our requests. So all of our requests are put on there and the council responds, and then we can track how quickly they are responding and whether there's anything outstanding. So to date we've had everything that we needed to complete the audit. There are a couple of investments papers which the council are still working on, but we agreed a prioritisation of those. Obviously the bigger, higher risk ones we agreed first, and then they're working on some of the smaller ones now. So we are not waiting for anything from the council, but as I said, there's quite a lot of moving parts, and there's going to be a lot of kind of to and fro in over the next few months. So I will. There's no reason to think that we wouldn't continue to get the information we need, but obviously I will flag it if there is any concerns.
Thank you. One question, Councillor Worrell.
And-
How many you want?
No, it's absolutely fine. It's just a quick one around RAC. So what is the process for finding that out? Because we did ask, we got a quick no, so what is being done to scratch below the surface, so to speak, to make sure that what was done is adequate and that we haven't got this anywhere? Because I kind of feel like we've got a lot of buildings around Thurrock that well could have that RAC cement.
So the council will need to propose to us how they've assured themselves that they don't have this in their buildings. So I assume that there will be a paper that will be given to us that will have in the types of buildings that they've considered, what they've considered, whether there has been any structural assessment at any point, and whether that indicates there is an issue. I wouldn't expect the council to go out and resurvey all of its properties. That's not necessary. I think from the records that you have, you should be able to identify whether this is a potential issue. It's just making sure that you've got a process for methodically going through those and identifying that, and being able to, give that assurance that there is no concerns.
And that come back here? Is that where it'll come here?
So I will, as part of the audit completion report, I will give a response to each of those risks. So I will, if there's any concerns that it's impacting on the financial statements or any concerns with that process, I will report it.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Councillor Collins.
I'm doing my best to work through the whole report. I don't want you to think I haven't read it. We got on page 38, and we're talking about property and plant equipment, which I understand. Could you explain to me what heritage assets are, please? It's the valuation of non-current assets.
So,
Coal house fault? Fault? If we go to page 39, thank you for answering that one. We go to valuation of pension liability, risk detail, assets. It's on the first paragraph. There is a risk around the valuation of scheme assets with unobserved inputs, which are therefore fair value. I'm not quite sure I understand what that's meant by. Could you explain, please?
when you have assets within the pension funds, there are levels of assets. So level one assets would be something that there's an available price for. So something that's on, for example, on the stock exchange or on the stock market that you could get a share price for. Level three assets are ones that don't have what we call an observable input. So there isn't that kind of number that we can just go and look up and say, yes, that should be £1.50 per share or something like that. It is much more judgmental. There is much more estimate involved in valuing some of these things. So, for example, I know in some of your pension fund assets, there is like pooled property funds. So there will be a valuation of the assets within those funds, sometimes buildings. And again, we'll need to make sure that those valuations have been undertaken correctly to come to those values for those level three assets.
Okay, thank you. You gave me all this stuff, and I did spend an awful lot of time, 2 days in the spare time, trying to read this. This is page 40. And this is to do with risk detail again, first paragraph on the left. There is a risk over the valuation of the allowances of the non-collection of receivables. Are we talking about people not paying their rent or their debts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Tandy, would you like to?
Just obviously the Toucan sale, maybe an update on that. Obviously, it's a big difference with our debt. Is it running smoothly? Is there an end date to it?
I think that's probably one for Jonathan to pick up.
Yes, so the process is progressing. Obviously, there's a lot of commercial sensitivity around it at the moment, but it's in line with the timelines we've expected. We're hoping to have an outcome within this financial year. So, and it hopefully slightly earlier than that. So yeah, no issues with the process. It's run through the administrators, so the administrators continue to run the process, and they're happy with where the process is at the moment.
Just coming back to the manual adjustments, appreciate it's reviewed in detail during the audit. But let's come back to the original question. What controls does a council have before they're actually entered after year end? Who signs them off? Is there a process around that?
Yeah, thanks. So obviously they're first of all subject to detailed review in the papers that we've talked about. So that's the basis for the transaction. So what we're doing with investment specifically is going through each element of them and agreeing broadly classification, valuation, and all the elements of them with the auditors. That will then, obviously, in terms of approach, that gives you the principles you're applying. That then enables us to create the transactions and post them to the system. So we've got a financial accounts team. So the financial accounts team will then generate the transactions. We've got a technical resource supporting that process. So that is an sort of live review and agreement of those transactions. And even in that process, we are touching base with the auditors as we develop those to say, right, we've agreed that this is the way we're heading, and that's via a series of progress meetings throughout. Ultimately, when we're proposed a set of transactions, they will come to me for review, and we will then go through the supporting data. Right, we've got a paper, we've got an approach, these are the figures, this is the basis for the figures, this is what gets posted, and as I was saying, year by year. So it's this year, this year, this year. And ultimately, that will then be reviewed again and posted, or potentially posted at that point. Obviously, the final part of the jigsaw is we've also got a CFO, and we will then take the CFO through that as well, so that all of those transactions are understood, agreed, and the allocation is made. Then we've got a systems accountant who will post them, so the journals are obviously presented, so we will create the journal. They will then make sure they're happy with the journal is meeting our requirements for the system. We will then post the journals, and ultimately then we will check that once the journals have been posted, they've then arrived in the accounts in the appropriate place, because beyond that, once the transaction is one thing, as you will know, the additional disclosures and the financial instruments disclosures, as Rachel said, these numbers appear in numerous places across the accounts. So we will present them in the accounts as well, and in all the different places they appear, there then is another level of review, which ultimately is me again and the CFO ultimately, to say this set of accounts now reflect these transactions appropriately. So there's kind of the approval process into the system, and then there's the approval process for what ends up in the accounts themselves, and then obviously it's subject to the audit, which we're trying to obviously navigate with their involvement throughout, so that we kind of tackle any potential issues. So particularly where there's a judgment call on a treatment of a particular transaction, we want to agree what that judgment is, and everyone's happy with that basically, before we post those in, because it's a hell of a lot of work to undo transactions if you come to a different view. Obviously then, still at the end, Rachel and team may have a slightly different view, and we need to consider that, and they will obviously report to you as members if they're not happy with anything. Yeah, thanks.
Carry on.
Yeah, just another question on materiality. You mentioned that was considered in detail and kept at 1.75%. What was the thought process behind keeping it at 1.75%?
So there are a range of factors that go into our consideration of materiality around stakeholder interest, users of accounts, and basically, who is going to be interested in what balances within these accounts, and what level does that therefore need to be in terms of materiality. So if you set, there is guidance that we use when we're setting materiality. The guidance for the range that you can use when you are using gross expenditure as the benchmark is 0.5 to 3%. So we're in the middle of that. So I feel that that is appropriately reflecting that we're not at the top end. So it's reflecting that we do have some factors that would lower that with stakeholder interest. But equally that these balances are of such significance that if I reduce materiality, it wouldn't scope anything in that I wasn't already looking at.
Just one final question. You mentioned the fees, and obviously there's going to be additional fees. Is there an estimated amount what that would be versus the original fee of 133k?
So I don't have an estimate at the moment. I expect that it will be significantly more. We have a number of specialists and experts that are involved in the audit, and they obviously come at the higher cost end. But what I have agreed with Stephen is that I will pull together an estimate of what I think that will be to share with him. Obviously, as I say, it's kind of PSAA who agree the fee, so they need to sign it off ultimately. But I can pull together what I think it might be given where we are and what we've got left to do and share that with him.
Thank you. My question relates mainly to the internal controls. And based on your observations or work so far, have you observed any serious controls over the corporate control environment?
So in terms of the controls, we do not take a controls approach to this audit. We have a fully substantive audit, so we don't test controls. What we do is look at the entity level controls in place and your control environment and consider whether that gives us any additional cause for concern. And we think about your IT general controls, so things like change management, user access, those kind of things, and whether that gives us, whether we can rely on those. So in terms of, obviously this is 2021, so in terms of that, we haven't identified any issues with your entity level controls. There are a number of factors impacting the ITGC, so the IT general controls, which means that we can't rely upon them. There is nothing that we would consider a significant deficiency, but there will be what we call management letter points. So we will come in our final report, once we've agreed with management, of some actions that we think the council could take to enable us to rely on those controls and then move to a more controls-based audit in the future.
So if I understand, it's to do with the council's infrastructure currently, that's why you can't do a controls-based audit.
So it's to do with the IT general controls, we call them, so things like change management and user access. So there will be some recommendations that we would raise for improvements to those systems. Like I said, it's nothing that is significant deficiency, so we're not saying that your system is deficient in any way. We're just saying that we can't rely on those to then be able to do a controls-based audit. So once we make those recommendations, if the council implements them, we should be able to get to a position where we can rely on the ITGCs and then look at whether we can move forward with controls testing rather than substantive testing, which is a lot less like transaction testing. So it would be a more efficient audit approach.
Back another question, Charles.
Since you're doing a substantive testing, what additional, should I say, timeline, lead time, or extra resource do you need for that, or has that been provided, or is that already accounted for?
So the majority of the substantive audit work has already been done. It was completed last year. So that has already been factored in and provided. The main thing that we have left to do is around the investments work. So that will always be kind of labour intensive, time intensive due to the complexity of those issues. But we do have a team booked now all the way through into the new year to make sure that we're progressing those things.
Thank you.
Has anyone got any other questions or comments? No, can I say thank you very much for reporting back to us and so on. And before we go on to the next item, I believe some of you are going to leave the meeting. Yes, is that right? So, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, you as well.
Oh,
wow.
I didn't know. if we move on to item 6, Counter Fraud and Investigation Performance Update. Can I ask Michael Deneen to present this item, please?
Thank you very much, Chair. This report is a performance update. It's pretty self-explanatory. I will go through it for the salient points. However, I won't go through it line from line, and then I will happily return it back to the Chair and other members. Just to point out, there are 2 recommendations at point 1 and 1.2. I've cleared this earlier with the chair of this committee. This report was due to be only Q1 because of some reporting timelines. However, I was able to complete statistical data for Q2 and get it into this report for this committee. I feel that this was a requirement, otherwise we were talking very much out of date data. So this is a combined report for which you will see a breakdown at 3.1 of Q1 and Q2 figures, and at 3.2 you'll see the combined half-year figures. Without any objections, I'll go through the combined, and then you can ask questions if you wish around the broken down figures. So the CFI, which is the Counter Fraud and Investigation Team, received 130. I just want to point that out. Me and the Chair noticed 130 reports of suspected fraud in the first 6 months of this year. 43 investigations were closed as no fraud, as there was no evidence found by the CFI of any wrongdoing. And 28 sanctions have been delivered in cases of proven fraud against individuals. This including the stopping of 3 right-to-buy applications and the recovery of 16 social housing properties in the first half of the year. What that represents is a potential saving to the council of just over £1 million in the first 6 months of work. And to quantify that, I'll take members back to the start of 3.1. With the second paragraph, the figures show the performance of CFI Q1, Q2 for 23-24. The formula that's used to quantify the projected savings made by the authority is derived from the recognised national annual average, which is the cost of temporary accommodation per family multiplied by 3, which is the average length of a tenancy fraud, plus the average investigation costs, legal costs, and the average void costs. This formula therefore equates to the projected the projected savings the authority will benefit from due to the recovery of a social housing home is approximately £48,000 per property. So that's how we come to that calculation. I don't want any member to believe that we have recovered £1 million and placed it in the council's money. That's not how our work unfortunately works. It does sometimes when we recover it, but a lot of our work is the preventative expenditure that is going to happen if we don't stop the fraud from continuing, and that's one way of explaining it, the best way I've found to explain it to yourselves. Moving on, the work plan for 23-24. You'll find this at Appendix 1. I think the easiest way to go through this is that we are on target. We had one target to meet prior to this meeting, which we met 1 month before the deadline, which was to develop the NFI systems and start an implementation process. That has been started by the new counter fraud and investigation manager that was appointed within this quarter. So that's moving along nicely. I will report, obviously, on the completion of that report and any progress, etc. And I will also report to this committee at any point where I think there will be slippage, so that you're fully aware of something that we can't deliver on. I don't believe there's anything else that I would bring your attention to, but I am happy to take any questions from the committee or the chair.
Thank you. Have any members got comments or questions? Councillor Worrell?
I think
Charles, sorry.
Can I point? Sorry, thank you. Can I point you to 3.5? This year there is a focus on delivering training and knowledge across the authority from employees to members. Is there an update on this training work that's been done?
Yeah, we are hoping to go live with our ICT training mechanism, which will go out through the laptops and the sign-ins that everybody has. We find that will be the most effective way of sending training to everyone within the authority, and that's hopefully go live by January.
Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I've always been a fan in this department, so well done for all your hard work. Have you taken on more staff recently?
We have the same amount of staff. I've changed the way I employ them from agency to fixed term. However, we have the same level of staff. So we have the two investigators and my manager, the investigation manager, and then I step in as the head of service because that position will remain vacant.
Thank you.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. So, great work. You know, I wish it was real money. You know, you could really be helping us out at the moment if it was real money. So the recovery of social homes. So my role is the shadow cabinet member for housing. So really pleased to see social homes taken back from people that shouldn't be having them. But I don't think that we celebrate that. You know, we shouldn't celebrate. We should be. If we was to press release this more, and I've been on scrutiny for years for housing, but I've never seen a report come there that told me that month by month we was taking homes back. It doesn't come back. It should be a report that comes through the Housing Scrutiny Committee, and it should be something that we make more of, because I think that people are clearly not frightened to do this because of the amount that we are taking back, and also the right to buyers, you know, and making it very, very clear that we will be looking in detail at who buys these, because I assume that this is when a family member tries to buy a right to buy where they've got no right to buy the home. So if you could explain what the normal process is for working this out, whether they should be buying it.
First of all, I'll take your first point. We do report into housing, so we will forward our findings and figures to them. However, we are developing a comms strategy. It forms part of the role of the new investigation manager. We are dealing with the comms team. And what we're hoping to do is push out a number of bits of comms, not just good news stories, because it's not just about that. It will include things like posters around housing estates, in lifts, in stairwells, etc., just to push the message really a little bit more. And that's being planned by the manager to move forward on. So it's something that we are conscious of already. In relation to how we find out if people are guilty of it, I'm going to have to disappoint you and say I'm not going to list it in a public forum. But what I can say is you're quite right. Sometimes that is, in essence, people applying when either they're not living at the property or that they're not entitled to it. There's many ways you're not entitled to a right to buy, for instance, and the process is there. The council has a very robust system to ensure that doesn't happen, and one of those procedures within that system is that every right to buy comes through to the fraud team, and then we look at it and send a review back to that department. Hence the reason on 3 occasions, and we don't expect it a lot, because as well the nature of the economy at the moment, buying houses isn't really happening a great deal, but nevertheless we are there and we do find it if it's there to be found.
So you said that you report it to the Housing Directorate, but it doesn't make it through on any housing reports. So is it measured, you know, anywhere? It surely should be measured, and it certainly should make it even as part of an overall report on scrutiny. So hopefully, you know, DEM services can make sure that this goes back to where it should go, to make it go onto that housing scrutiny work plan, you know, just once a year, just for even if it's just an advice, you know, report.
Not a problem. I'll take that away to Housing Director, and I'm certain that that's very much a feasible thing, because the report can just be forwarded to that person as well.
I've got another question.
sorry. You go. Carry on.
Yeah, I've got another question on the work plan as well. So the last one is about Canter Fraud and Investigation Team will work with social care teams and review those applicants for direct payments. So what are we looking for there? And, you know, again, how will that be measured?
Historically, I personally regard direct payments as a high-risk area for fraud, simply because I've come across it quite a lot personally. So therefore, it's something that's always in my mind and something I wanted on the work plan. But not just that, it is recognised across the local authorities that is a problem area. The type of issues that we can face in direct payment is whereby someone has a relative or a loved one caring for them. They inflate invoices, they inflate charges, they falsify the level of care that they need by pretending when they get assessed, etc. So we have our own methods by trying to find information or evidence that disproves that, and therefore we're able to then take those people through the courts and potentially get the money back that we have given them for the care that they don't deserve. So it's that kind of stuff. I won't, again, not going to go into detail on how, but that is the kind of allegation that would be received by my team.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last question. You were talking about, this is on page 60 at the bottom, about sanctions being delivered to proven fraud cases. We told us you'd stopped 3 right-to-buy applications, and I take it you've repossessed some other houses. What other sanctions are there, if there are any, please?
The other sanctions that fall into the drop-down, and I can't tell you exactly what they were because I don't have that information, but within our drop-down they include formal warnings, formal cautions, housing tenancy warning letters, etc. So any positive action that has resulted from the work the team do because of something that's happened, we regard that as a sanction, something that we can take forward and use again if they commit an offence or if they do something of a similar nature.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tandy.
Yeah, what was the 10, obviously you got 10 social housing properties you recovered. What was the reasons they were recovered?
We recovered 10 in Q2, but the 16 overall. In general terms, again, I can't speak to specifics because we never comment on individual cases, but in general terms, the reasoning for recovering a property back will be that it's either been abandoned by an individual or it has been sublet, and we've found out about the sublet, we've investigated that, and we've taken the house back through those means. Or simply our interaction sometimes on a very basic level. For instance, we may get an allegation around one thing, turn up at an address, it isn't all that is meant to be, and that resident decides, actually, I don't need a council property anymore. There's the keys. So that we also have voluntary return of properties because of the action that we're taking. So there's a number of ways that we can get a property back, but I would suggest the 2 main ways are a notice to quit signed by the resident because we have found them to have abandoned their property. And that's generally the most common one that we find.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Does housing benefit and council tax fraud fit within your team, or does that come under? Is it a different team?
Housing benefit comes through DWP and SFIS, so it goes over there. We deal with a single person discount, but obviously the housing benefit is really the main problem there. That would be, we would take the referral and send it on to DWP.
Charles, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. Thank you. In a previous report, I have noticed that there was charts to explain and put numbers to different type of fraud cases, i.e. proceeds of crime, council tax and COVID-19. Is that kind of report coming subsequently?
That report is our end-of-year report that I presented at the last committee. We try to break down the end-of-year report into much more specifics so that the members can understand exactly where throughout the year we've seen different crime types rise. So generally our quarterly reports, which are quite often, come in a format such as this, and then our yearly report comes in the one that you would have seen at the previous committee, which is a bit more of a presentation report that really does try to break down everything we've done in the past year.
Sorry.
Carry on.
Thank you. I'm asking the question because it doesn't seem to give much detail to understand where the recurrent fraud patterns are, i.e. cases, what type of scenarios give us that consistent fraud case quarter after quarter. This just gives us a summary report. I can't see any poker crime or anything else.
Yeah, we were reporting figures in relation to what we had done on previous years, and that is normally what we would do. However, last year, I think it's noted in the annual report, we had to change the way we reported because they could no longer be correlated because the size of the teams were completely different and the way that we were going about the investigation were completely different. When I tried to present that in a visual form, it simply didn't work because the numbers were so vast. However, it is my plan as we move forward and we go into next year's end-of-year plan. You will see last year's, then this year's, and we will continue on to do that. So you will have a comparable through the years, and then you'll also have a comparable of the rates of different crime types. So not just value, but also crime types. And then we'll be able to compare our performance from last year to this year. So I'm hopeful that as my team now develops, data like that will become available and will be presented to you all.
Thank you. Anyone else got a comment? Councillor Tandy?
Oh, yeah, so obviously with the cutbacks as well, has it affected you? Because obviously listening to you, your team could grow and be an official to the council. Is that possible?
I think my team would moan if I said I didn't want them to grow. But if I'm truthful, we have taken a new approach this year, and that's what that end-of-year report was about. It's about us facing inwardly to Thurrock only and concentrating on the issues that Thurrock have. I think that can be seen from this half-year report. If you only compare it to last year, I think we recovered, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor, four properties like the year before. We've already got 16. That approach has changed. We are being much more focused internally. So at the moment, I'm quite comfortable with the team that I've got, and I will ensure through the manager that we use our resources effectively so that the benefits come back to Thurrock, and that's our main focus.
Thank you. No one else? Shall we move to the recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay, 1.1, the Audit Committee comments on the performance of the Counter Fraud and Investigation Team.
Agreed, done that.
Yeah. And 1.2, the Audit Committee agrees to continue the proactive work plan as found at Appendix 1.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, complaints received under the Members' Code of Conduct. The report can be found on page 69 of the agenda. And can I ask Azmat Hussain to present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to pass this over to Gina Clark, who is the Council's governance lawyer and the Deputy Monitoring Officer. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you, Azmat. Chair, you have the report before you. You had a report on Member Code of Conduct complaints at this committee last July, and this is an update report in relation to complaints that have been received by the monitoring officer since the municipal year, this year, since the 1st of May. And by way of a recap at 2.1, I'd like the committee to note that all the complaints that were reported to the committee last year, which were 10 complaints, they have all now been closed, with the exception of one complaint, with the exception of 3 complaints, which are outstanding, and that those 3 complaints for the first time are going to be heard by a hearing panel, which is due to be convened for the members to make a decision on that complaint, and that's something that hasn't happened in Thurrock. I don't think it's ever happened in Thurrock, so that complaint is outstanding for a hearing. I think that's worth noting for the committee to note. In relation to this year, up to the 3rd of November, we have received 8 complaints so far, and those are outlined in the table in the report at 2.2. As a committee, I'd like to bring to the committee that most of the complaints received are members against other members. So we've had 6 councillors have made complaints against other councillors about their behaviour, and the behaviour is usually about disrespect. Only 2 members of the public have made complaints. I think that's interesting to note, and I would say that has been the current theme in Thurrock, that over the time that I have been here, it's not the members of the public that make the complaints against members, it's other councillors making those complaints. I must say as well, highlight that the majority of the complaints are resolved by way of informal means, and that is the standard practice in terms of the public interest and the assessment criteria that we have for dealing with complaints, which is set out in the Council's constitution, as we have to follow the procedures that we have put in place, which we are required to do by law. So those are the main issues about the complaints, which is self-explanatory. So if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you for that. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Worrell?
Thanks, Chair. On the table of the complaints, I can see that there's sort of a pattern that they all come in on the same day, or within a day of each other. So is this different councillors being reported, or is this several councillors reporting the same? You know, so they've all got aggressive behaviour in the chambers. Is that one councillor that they're all complaining against? And the same at the top one where it says derogatory and racist comments regarding scheme. Is that 2 councillors have complained about that same one councillor? So almost like not agreeing that one person will do it and get it done. So because now you've got all of those open, and they've all got to take time, and they've all got to have, go out to an independent person. I almost feel like that feels like a little bit like pack mentality there, and that it should be agreed through that group, through the leaders, you know, who's going to put that in, because I just kind of feel like it's a lot of time, and most of the time it gets written off as no further action, or you know, just pushed to one side. I know there's a process for it, but it feels like a lot of work when there's not a big result at the end of it, you know. So I just kind of feel like, yeah, I think I know what that bottom one is, and I can't believe.
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is that the complaints listed, yes, they are several councillors making a complaint against a particular councillor. In terms of the complaints process, we're obliged to take individual complaints unless the the complainants agree that usually their individual complaints are made, so we have to treat them as individual complaints. But in terms of dealing with them, they are all dealt with together in terms of the assessment of that complaint and how it is processed going to the independent person. So that in that way it does save officer time in doing it that way. But there's no way we can do that unless all the complainants would agree, and they don't always necessarily know, I would say. Well, that knowledge is not given. That knowledge isn't. You assume that. Yeah. That knowledge isn't given to the monitoring officer.
Thank you. I think, if I just interrupt for a moment, sorry, I just think it might be useful for future reports that there was something on here that actually tells us, although they're two separate complaints, they're about the same person, because otherwise it looks as though we've got 8 people running amok, and you know, just for information.
I just bunch them together.
We certainly can do that.
Thank you. Councillor Collins?
Yes, thanks very much. It's basically along the same lines. Can I just confirm we're only talking, the only person who's being complained about is just one person, or is it several?
No, well, in relation to the first 2 complaints, that is the same. That's several members complaining about the same member, and also the second, the disrespect comments in meetings. They relate to the same facts, but it's about the same members being complained about. And also, yes, the 3 at the bottom as well. Yes, the pattern. There is that pattern.
It's the same person, yeah?
No, not for all of them.
Not all of them. No, it's different members complaining about one member, but it might be.
No. I mean, who is actually the butt of all the complaints? Is it just one?
Can't say. No, we can't because these are. Yeah, it has to be anonymised.
Has anyone else got a comment or question? No? Thank you very much for your report. I'll leave that on. Can we now go to the recommendations?
You might have asked about when the convened meeting might be. Because I haven't got a date.
No, but we can do that with the work programme, I think. Sorry. Where are we? Recommendations that the committee note the outcomes on complaints received under the Members' Code of Conduct during the municipal year 2023 to 24 up to the 3rd of November 2023. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 8, the work programme. This can be found on page 73 of the agenda. Do any members wish to comment on the work programme?
Dan's got loads of stuff on it.
Do you want to?
No, I'm too new to know.
So can I just confirm something that you said earlier, Asmat, which that those things will be put onto the work programme and it will be circulated. Can I also ask that the additional meeting is on there, even if you can't confirm the date yet?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to agree that, and I've already emailed the team saying could they please do that. So hopefully we'll have it by next week, a date and those items on the work programme, but I will make sure it is shared online. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Has anyone else got a comment or question, Charles?
Yes, it relates to the 29th of February 2024 meeting. Doesn't seem to have anything on counter fraud. I'm not sure if that's...
I can answer that. Thank you very much, Councillor. As I said earlier, today was meant to be just Q1 report because of the timelines of our reporting. I completed that report and it was waiting the processes that we have to follow at the moment through governance when Q2 ended. So I therefore asked the Chair, Councillor Massey, whether he would oblige me to add Q2 details to that report, because I felt that reporting to you tonight on only Q1 seemed irrelevant and quite old. He agreed, as did RSLT, so it was put into this report, so that tonight I was able to give you a full report on the last 6 months of the work. So hence the reason Q2 now has been pulled from that February report.
Any more questions from anyone? No? There we are then. Well, I think that concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I now declare the meeting closed at
8:25.
8:25.
Well done.
Thank you.